everyone. Today we're joined by Megan Clark, the head of the Australian Space Agency. It's nice to be with you today, Megan.
Hi, Sean. It's great to be here, and thanks for what you're doing for developing the whole interest in space.
Fantastic. So I guess we'll just start off. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and your role at the Space Agency?
Yeah, I'm the head of the Space Agency. We're just young. We just celebrated our second birthday, so I've been here since the beginning. Never dreamed that this is something that I'd be doing. But what's really great to see now is we just have such an amazing team, working in all the different areas. So it's fantastic to see something that Australia didn't have many years ago. Now we've got the Space Agency, and you can really see the difference that it's making in the opportunities we're getting internationally. The growth in the sector gives them a lot of support when they're talking internationally. And so it was something we were missing, and it's great to have the Space Agency really propelling and transforming our space industry.
Yeah, I know just from a personal point of view that, the announcement of it was kind of huge news, something that I've been thinking about since I'm studying aerospace, and then it all happened before I could even kind of make any headway myself into trying to get something to happen. So that was really exciting. Something I want to ask you personally about yourself is how you kind of ended up in the role. So when I was looking at your kind of past experience, you've worked at a number of companies in a number of different roles. And how did you kind of end up at the Space Agency?
Yeah, I'm still asking myself that question, Sean. So, but look, I've worked with government. So when I headed the CSIRO, and we really expanded the work that we were doing there in space we have the Deep Space Communications Centre in Tidbinbilla, but we also managed to expand that and expand what NASA was doing there and invested. And plus the Square Kilometre Array project, so the radio astronomy piece. So I suppose when it came time to look at reviewing our space industry capability, it was that, I think, combination of having government experience but also scientific and industry experience that I was asked to lead that review. We worked really hard to not just answer the question, do we need a space agency, but what should its strategy be, what should its values and charter be. So we tried to get that work done. Didn't expect then to be involved in it, but it's been a delight to help set it up and hopefully build the right team that can take it forward for the next few decades.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess related to that, my next question is kind of what do you consider as being the most difficult thing that you've done in your career, or the biggest project or the hardest task?
Yeah, I don't think you can get too daunted, because sometimes projects seem impossible. And if you get daunted, you don't move forward. But I do remember right at the very beginning of the Space Agency when literally we just had one or two people, and you could see all of the things that we needed to do. And I'd set myself the task of going and meeting with the sort of support we could get here from the department. And I remember saying, look, I needed a comms plan. So I talked to the communication people. I needed this. And I can remember that day just realising how much support we needed. And I said to one group, I really need some help in this area. And they came into that meeting and they said, yep, here's all the stuff we're going to do for you. Here's everything that we'll do to support you. And I was really almost emotional, because you need that support very early on. And we just had great people that got right behind us. There was, I would say, for decades, a large group of people in Australia who had been pushing so hard for a space agency. And what became clear was that there was just so much support, so much momentum behind us. And everyone wanted it to be successful, because we'd seen Australia have a couple of goes at a space agency and they'd failed. They'd sort of closed. It didn't get funding. So what was kind of nice when you're looking at this daunting aspect of, gee, we have to put everything in place, like just, bit by bit, was the tremendous support we had. And then you just take it kind of step by step, each brick in the wall. So you start with what are your values and your purpose, and we literally went from there to our roles and responsibilities, our charter, and then our strategy, and then our funding programs. And, bit by bit, you build those bricks. And we're still doing that now. So we're working now on all of our risk and regulation. So I suppose when things are really tough, and all of us face things that seem really daunting, I try to kind of just go, break it right down, take it step by step, and try not to get daunted, but definitely just keep moving it forward and get as much fantastic support as you can around you.
Fantastic. Sounds like we're in good hands, that's for sure. I'm
Oh,
looking forward to the future.
look, I don't think you'd be human if you didn't have days of self-doubt, and we all have that. I'm sure you have that as well, Sean.
Absolutely.
And I think on those days, you know you have to say, well, look, we're building something here for the nation. We're building something that is for the next 100 years, not for tomorrow. And you go right back to the values. As long as we're absolutely clear about what we're doing and our purpose, we know what we're trying to do, transform and grow this industry and do it with partnerships, really change the lives of every Australian. Once you know what you're doing and you have your values, just every day do what you said you were going to do. So when we're talking to international organizations, we stick to that. If we said to NASA we were going to deliver this, we deliver it. And those fundamental values kind of keep you on the straight and narrow when sometimes you might not know what it is the next step is. But if you do that, if we're responsible in space, so we know that Australia has to be responsible. What does that mean? That means taking your role in the United Nations. That means having the right regulatory framework. That means making sure nobody gets injured on our launch pads. And so you take that value and it kind of breaks it down. And they're being entrepreneurial, kind of, let's be Australian, let's get out there. Let's show the world what we can do. And, we've got lots of that. So I find sometimes you don't necessarily have to have the exact pathway, but you do have to have clarity on your values.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So following on from that, what's going on at the Space Agency right now?
Yeah, look, right now some really exciting things. So we knew during COVID as well that we weren't the front line. We weren't making masks, we weren't testing people, and we needed in an emergency, you need to let the people who are doing that do that. But what we absolutely knew was that space was going to be a very important part of the recovery from COVID. It's a fast-moving industry, sort of growing at 7.5%, 8.5%. So it's growing, it's manufacturing, it's high-tech jobs, it's in the cities, it's out in the regions. We knew that. And so we knew we had to keep our head down and get our programs work through to get funding out into the industry. So what's been really nice is over the last few weeks, we've announced the mission control contract to Sabre Astronautics. So that will be different to any other mission control. Small companies will be able to come in and use it to quickly get their space assets up there and tracking them. We'll be able to bring in the public as well. So we have a nice screen at the back. We can black it out if we're doing something that is confidential, but people will be able to walk off the street and see mission control. So that's kind of exciting. We also announced a robotics command and control centre in Perth, and this is leveraging off the good capability that you have in WA to manage offshore and remote assets. So Fugro Marine Australia has won that contract, and that will mean we can start talking to NASA about controlling robotic activity on the moon, so an Earth-based backup, but also start talking about how we do that in orbit. That's really exciting. We also put out a grant to the Pawsey supercomputer to be able to look at space data as well. And we had already funded University of Tasmania to expand their de-orbit tracking. So this is when you're coming into land and reuse, rocket pieces, particularly if you're doing that off the west coast of the US, you often enter the atmosphere above Australia. So having a de-orbit capacity at that, critical point when you're trying to get the angle right and you're trying to get into the atmosphere, you get that wrong, lots of issues arise. So we knew that having that de-orbit tracking could open up opportunities as well. So we've been laying all this groundwork and sort of foundational infrastructure. We've still got a couple of projects to go. Qualification facilities, so we're just looking at what's needed there, and also some additional manufacturing potential in Sydney at the Aerotropolis. And then the second piece we did was we had our first round of the international fund. So we had $11 million of grants go out, and that just blew us away. And we had over 160 fantastic applications. I mean, we could have drawn that line a lot further down than we did, but it was so that was disheartening for us and disheartening for everybody else, because there were some fantastic opportunities, but it also showed government that there's more appetite here. So that helps us with the next round. But there are things like, spacesuits. So the work that's been going on at RMIT for spacesuits, and I think that's amazing. So Human Aerospace got that contract. We will do the first kind of all Australian mission, which is the Melbourne University Spirit mission. And, that's going to, showcase some of the propulsion systems from Newman, Nova Systems, the work of University of Melbourne on spacecraft. So that's going to be fantastic. We had some really nice passive radar. So using the electromagnetic radiation that you have naturally in the atmosphere from all the activities that we do on Earth, and how that's reflected back in passive radar. That one is going to Silentium for space situational awareness. So, just touch on a couple of those projects. They're fantastic projects, and they're going to really showcase. So that kind of gives you a bit of an update on the most recent things that we've been doing. But the purpose here is to really get that momentum out there and show the world what Australia can do.
Yeah. What I really appreciate about that last round of funding that you just mentioned was the kind of breadth of projects that are being supported as well. So, it's not all just being pumped into satellites or launch or whatever it might be, but it's a really wide variety of projects. And I think that's really going to foster, further growth in all those areas, so that we can build a really strong sovereign industry in Australia.
Yes, and as I said, we could have gone a lot further down. So we need to try and figure out how we can do some more.
Get some more money, hopefully.
Yeah, and the other piece that we haven't talked about is Moon to Mars. So we have significant funding, the 150 million. We're still designing that, but we know in the design phase we'll have what we call a supply chain piece. We'll get that out quickly. This is for industry players that already have a partner that is going to contract some piece into the return to the moon or onto Mars, and we can put some Australian capability technology in there. So that's kind of really fast, getting those partnerships up and running, getting them funded, and getting them into cash flow, because that's what's going to help those companies hire Australians. So that's the first bit. The second bit will be the demonstrator projects. So having kind of kicked it off with the supply chain projects, we then want to maybe go a bit broader and say, look, we've got this great technology, but until the world can see it actually operate in space, until it's tested, it's really hard to get over that barrier if you're a researcher or a company. So the next piece will be how we can showcase the Australian stuff and then generate interest from that for joint missions. We can do that through our international partners as well. And then the last one is a trailblazer. We haven't defined what that is. We're working through that, but we've narrowed it down to a series of areas. So optical communication, using laser, using light for comms, which will be so important in lunar orbit and these longer duration missions. Also the area of robotics, so off-Earth robotics on the surface of the moon, etc., and control. Space medicine, definitely cranking up the space medicine side of things, a lot of interest in that. Also the areas of what we call sort of celestial mapping. So it turns out Australia is really good at taking all the satellite data, taking information, making that kind of data cube technology that Geoscience Australia has and is used quite a bit around Australia. And actually nothing like that exists for all the data on Mars and all the data on the moon. And so looking at that framework capability is something that we're looking at for moon to Mars. So in situ resource, we're going to have to drill for water on the moon to see if you can create fuel and oxygen. So these are some of the areas. Now from all of those areas, we'll narrow that down to one trailblazer, which will be a signature part of the Australian mission.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess my next question relates to that. I distinctly remember when the space agency was first announced, they said, this isn't going to look like your NASA JPL or ESA. Is that still the directive, or might there be the push, in 5 or 10 or 20 years to have a specifically Australian Space Agency vehicle being launched into space?
Yeah, we do have a different model. So, and it's a kind of unique model. And our model is really to build momentum faster than any other agency has built it. So you've got two models. At one end, you can have all the money inside and you can do the missions. That was kind of the way that NASA used to run. And NASA's now run, still gets the money, still gets $20 billion. I'm not jealous, but it gets 20 billion. And then now contracts to the commercial realm, right? And then ESA, of course, collects the money from multiple countries and has sort of joint funded missions, but controls quite a bit of those projects. We wanted to do two things. We wanted to really open up all of the capability in the country rather than have it kind of sitting in this sort of central, build up a central agency. We wanted to move faster than that. So our model is that we kind of get out there and partner much earlier on the missions, and we'll take a role in looking at the project pipeline and project management and how we keep the rigor of that. But we think it's a faster model. It's a new model. NASA kind of likes it, interestingly enough. So they're kind of looking at us going, how come you guys are moving so fast? But nothing's off the table. So I think as we go to the future, science missions, for example, which we'll do in partnership, and I think you'll see us do those as well, just showcasing Australian technology. So we haven't limited our vision, but you got to get started. You've got to get started, and you've got to get the country behind you. You've got to get the government behind you, and once you've got that, then you can start really exploring it. But we've never kind of crimped our vision, so we've never ruled anything out at all.
Excellent. And then I guess the even bigger question on top of that is, if we're designing spacesuits and launch vehicles and everything else, are we one day going to launch Australian astronauts from Australia?
Well, it's a really good question, because in our strategy, so we put out our strategy and we put it out in the page. We're quite transparent of everything we were going to do in each of the years. And in the regulatory piece, we know that the first step of even being able to launch an astronaut is our regulation actually doesn't even have provision for launching humans from Australian soil. So we need to make sure we've got the foundation and the framework. So we're building that in this current strategy. But you can see that it's such an important area. So early days, but we're certainly laying the foundations for that to happen. I think the other thing that's changed is the opportunity to do that is much broader than it was in the past. You've got sort of space tourism, you've got supply missions, you'll have commercial supply missions. So there's a much broader palette of opportunities to get Australians into space than we've ever had before. And we need to explore those, the cost of those, what that might mean as well. We're already, even in the international fund side as well. University of Canberra will be looking at, astronaut training. So we're starting to build that capability for astronaut training. So,
cool. Definitely sounds like there's things happening slowly.
Yeah, well, as I said, you got to build all your. You've got to build the framework so that you're ready at the right time.
Cool, fantastic. And then, okay, so our final question for, I guess, the space-related side of things is there anything kind of in the works at the moment in partnership with those other space agencies from other countries? So any kind of flagship missions or anything that the space agency is going to be involved with, either on the vehicle or using our tracking capabilities? Yeah,
great question. Already from the Italian Space Agency, they gave us a birthday present, sort of early birthday present. They characterised it as their little sister. It was really lovely, and so they've given us 35 kilogram access on the International Space Station for Australian assets, and so we're just working through that at the moment, and then we'll put that out for opportunities for people to be able to load payloads. So we're already starting to work with that. Obviously, we're working alongside NASA on the Moon to Mars mission. And then we're starting to have some really good projects around the country where individuals and investigators are now starting to work really closely on missions. We want to expand that area. So we've seen this to Mars 2020 support. We've got some nice support in space medicine as well. So these are areas that we definitely want to see how we can support them. But right now, we're focused on getting our current programs and projects up and running and done very well.
Excellent. So as people might already know listening, you're a big advocate for women in STEM as well. Is there anything that you and the Space Agency would like to achieve in your roles to get more girls into STEM fields?
Yeah, we want to get more young people as well. So we're looking at, internship programs. Already we know we've made a difference in STEM. It was really interesting. You think the country spent a lot of time on STEM, trying to tackle this issue of why we don't have equal participation in some of the areas of STEM. And the minute we announced the Space Agency, already it made a difference to young kids. And so you realise we were sort of encouraging into STEM, but saying, oh, by the way, you can't be in space, which is really interesting. And I had a lovely letter from a young kid who said, I thought I couldn't do this. It was Lily, was her name. And she says, I thought, and she was really young. She was like blocking this opportunity off in primary school going, I didn't think I could pursue this. So, and then she goes, but now I can. So you realise that we've been sending messages to kids really young that this was not an opportunity that they could pursue. So we definitely need to look at that. We also sort of knew that we had to demonstrate, not just talk about, that there is no barrier. And so we're, 50% female, male in, women, men in the Space Agency, which just demonstrates that that's what it should be. There's no barrier. You just need the best talent. You need the best talent this country can have. So I think there's things as well that we've been just genuinely trying to show in the way we do things that hopefully is visible as well to kids out there. And then the next piece for us is creating the jobs, the opportunities, internships. We also want to look at how we support Indigenous students as well in the internship program as well, because you realise that our Indigenous history is 65,000 years of connection with space. It just goes right to the heart of who we are and that history that we have. And so, that's something that we want to make sure is really celebrated. It's just such a natural connection there. We've got our first ground station in Alice Springs, which is on Indigenous owned. And so that partnership, I think, is just such a fruitful partnership that works really well. So there's lots of areas that we're looking at in that. We've been supporting, for example, the Deadly Science Awards, etc. But I just would really love people to be curious about space, and the work that you guys are doing as well is fantastic and informing people. It's a wonderful career. It's got such breadth. And the good thing is you're kind of surrounded by nerds. So if you feel a bit that way, feel a bit like, space, I can tell you the whole agency, we're all a bit like that. It's just wonderful to be surrounded by those, that kind of people, and not limiting your dreams. We can do this. So it's a wonderful opportunity for young people, and we really want to create those jobs and create those opportunities.
Yeah, it's interesting that you just said that. I mean, when I started my degree, I kind of had the idea of, do my 4 or 5 years, maybe get a job here for a couple of years, and then off we go to the US. But obviously now that doesn't have to be the case, and there's so much capability here and so much potential. And as you said, kind of that Australian way of thinking that, you can do it yourself if you want to, be a bit rogue and just kind of do whatever you want to do. I think it's a really good place to be at the moment. That's really exciting.
It is, and we've already seen, we've only had a couple of years of data, but we've already seen that our space sector is growing at over 7% just in the last few years. And well, that's already outstripping the growth of the sector in Canada and the UK. So you're right, in terms of where you want to go, obviously there's wonderful opportunities going overseas, but we want to create some of those opportunities here and then have the opportunity to participate in joint missions and participate in international teams. How good would that be? There's nothing stopping Australian creativity and ideas really showing what we can do internationally. we haven't had those doors open to us, but in terms of our capability, we can definitely do this.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to not being restricted by the fact that you're in Australia, and I think that we're definitely on the way to achieving that.
Yeah, and we know we've got some great advantages. We've got the geographic advantages. We're a small country, we kind of know each other as well, so we can move fast.
Yeah.
And we've demonstrated that we can move fast, and that's been really noted as well. We don't have the funding, we don't have some of the commercial aspects, but we're building them fast. And the other piece we've got is now defence coming in with quite a bit of ballast. So they'll be spending $7 billion in space capability in the next 10 years. That creates opportunities as well. So you can see, bit by bit, you build up all the things that we need to do to create the momentum, and the momentum and investment creates opportunities for you and your colleagues.
Absolutely. So just on that, you've transitioned perfectly into our next question. What opportunities are you looking to create for kind of students and young professionals? You mentioned internships. Do you have any idea what they might look like yet, and what students might get to do?
Yeah, we're just designing that at the moment. So, and this is kind of conceptual as to where we are, but we definitely want to have an internship program where the students are not also have funding themselves, so that that it's open to anyone, because you've still got to live, and so we understand that, and we want to see three aspects of that. So, training in the agency itself. Training in a international partnership somehow, so whether it's a joint mission or an international opportunity, and then industry experience. So getting that kind of three corners to the opportunities, which then can take you anywhere. It means you can go into industry, you can go into the research, you can go into perhaps international opportunities. So we want to have an internship that lays a good foundation, and we're just still designing that, and we've already started some of the funding for that, so attracting the funding for that. So that's an important piece. It's in our strategy, and we're slowly putting that together. I'd love it to move fast, but you've got to work through everything that we're doing. So yeah, that'll be great when we can announce that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I've just thought off the top of my head, like, are there going to be opportunities for, say, PhDs or masters projects, or maybe a space incubator at some stage?
Yeah, the incubator piece is, there's quite a few players in that incubator piece. So at this early stage, we're not going into that, because we have groups like Main Sequence Ventures. You have several of the incubators now working in that area. I'm not saying that we have enough, but there are players in there. So so we've said that's not an area that we're going into in this strategy. We would certainly like to see that venture capital investment continue. And what do you need for that venture capital investment to continue? They need the milestones, they need the demonstration, they need some of the projects that we're doing will then help them come in and invest. So as I said, we're not building an incubator, but CSIRO's been putting up their future science platform area. They've got supporting incubator piece. So we're starting to see some of the space companies, Myriota, Fleet, Gilmore, as well, getting and attracting funding. But they'll need to meet their milestones to be able to continue that funding. So not as I said, not an area we're focusing on, but an important area for the ecosystem.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions that I've got. Do you have anything that you wanted to mention as well, or I don't know, any questions for me?
I might just finish off with launch. We've seen a lot of good momentum now in launch. I think since I last spoke to the AYA team and some of the people looking to graduate in this area, there's been real momentum in that area. So we've now got several companies looking at launch sites, as well as propulsion capability. So that's really exciting. I think if we don't even close have enough propulsion engineers, so that's going to be an area that is so important for us. And it's not just propulsion in terms of getting out of the atmosphere, but actually in orbit propulsion as well. So companies like Newman Space. and how we're going to have novel propulsion for these much longer missions getting to Mars, and then even propulsion when you're on Mars. So the moon doesn't have an atmosphere. Mars has a little bit of an atmosphere. So how do you do that? So there's quite a bit happening in this new area, and I think certainly one to watch for people looking for opportunities.
Yeah. Do you think that having, several companies designing launch vehicles, and I guess we've got several companies building launch sites as well, is that competition going to be healthy going into the future?
Well, the government, you're going to look at what the government role is versus the commercial role. So the commercial players need to do what they do well. Get out there, hustle, get their funding, demonstrate what they can do, raise their, get their customers, and that's the commercial role. You look at our role. First of all, we've got to absolutely make sure that the regulations are there to balance both safety and entrepreneurship. So we've got to make sure the regulations are there. We've got to make sure the environment is right for them, and we're working hard to create that momentum that supports them, and then let commercial do what it needs to do. So it's not easy. It's not going to be easy to get through all those milestones for them, and it's not going to be easy to get all the customers. But early signs are good. Now, plus, I think what's happened in the last 12 months is this real national pride piece of launch, is that we want that sovereign capacity. Defence is also looking at what capacity we need there, and that momentum can fuel some big steps forward.
Excellent. All right, Megan Clark, thank you for your time.
Pleasure, Sean.
And I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, lovely to chat. I hope this has been worthwhile for you.
Great, thank you.
Take care.